Hey, how's it going? My name is Gus, and I work for the government. My actual technical job title is both confusing and uninteresting. But my primary duties, as another paper-shuffling cog in the machine, are to manage military expenses, defense budget projects, contracts and spendings, both proposed and actual, and then simply check them off if it's an ordinary day. Or sometimes on particularly exciting days, I get the thrill of writing the relevant reports and realigned recommendations. My area of expertise is with the equipment sought after by military intelligence for use in pursuits involving the army specifically. Honestly, it's not as fun as it might sound. I mean, a guy can only review amendments to the budget for non-vehicular clutch discs so many times before he starts to feel his sanity slipping away. Not to mention the fact that the military spends far too much on clutch discs anyhow, but I've long since given up suggesting reforms to the strategy. They all go ignored. Anyway, I'm boring you. The reason I'm putting these thoughts into words at all is because I have, for the first time in my professional career, stumbled across something genuinely interesting. And it goes much further than that, to tell the truth. Interesting, yes, but also deeply, primally fascinating, confusing, terrifying, and I need an outlet for my anxieties. There's no one I can discuss this with in the real world, because as I've discovered, no one wants to believe it. So, I'm putting it all here. I don't know what I want from this. I just need to get it all down, from start to finish. It began on an unremarkable day, just like any other. I can see myself now, typing away at my computer, my eyes heavy and blinks slow as the day draws to a close. I'm cross-checking a series of reports made regarding use and costs of volumetric concrete in the military base in the Philippines, ensuring that there is sufficient collaboration between these reports to prevent any red flags being raised. A colleague groans and stretches in their chair, arising and pulling their jacket over their shoulders. They nod to me as they take their leave for the evening, and I give them a wary wave of the hand in response. The office is pretty much empty right now. I can hear a keyboard being tapped on some distance away. The overhead fan rotates steadily. Lights blink in the dark distance beyond the windows. With a sigh, I decide to follow on behind my colleague and to finish up this project tomorrow. But just as I bring the cursor over to close the window, my eye catches on something surprising. Most people wouldn't even have noticed it. Hell, even I barely did. But what can I say? It piqued my curiosity. There was a hyperlink in the document, contained within a single numbered footnote in the body of the text, in a place I was not expecting to see one. I click, and it leads to another document. This one, several years old, relating to the use of volumetric concrete in the North Sea region. Again, this would not have been worth even a second thought, but as someone who sifts through a great deal of boring data, this rang a little alarm bell right in the back of my head. I would have been the one in charge of budgeting for this material, but I have no recollection of its use anywhere near the North Sea, certainly not in the last 5 years or so. I rub a hand across my jaw and am suddenly fearful that I've made a mistake somewhere, and once that kind of feeling settles in, it's damn difficult to get rid of. I lean a little closer to my computer and get to work, clicking and hunting for further information. To my horror, it seems like an absolutely colossal amount of the concrete was used on a seemingly unlabeled project not long ago. And after clicking and searching and physically rummaging through cabinets full of fusty old files, I realize that it's not the first time that such a large amount of material has been diverted north. And it almost seems as if it's been a regular occurrence, going back for decades, or perhaps even longer. An hour takes by, and then another. I'm the only one in the office now, my eyes bloodshot. Many of the lights have been switched off, and curious shadows are thrown across the walls and empty desks. What the hell even is this? I mumble aloud, adjusting my tie as I delve deeper and deeper. At long last, I discover what could be a name, a potential label for this bizarre and mysterious project. One that has been, seemingly, deliberately hidden from sight. The name given is Aear's Mother. I find it scribbled in pen in the corners of a single page, photocopied in barely legible sheet from 1991. Aear's Mother, I read aloud, uncertain, as a chill creeps through the building and a light blinks warningly in a faraway corridor. I cross-check this name with other departments. I use my security key to access vaults reserved for other branches, the Navy for instance, and the Air Force. And not only do I find matching reports that corroborate with my own, but I discover more. I realize that all sorts of materials and items, and even manpower has, at semi-regular intervals, been funneled discreetly out of lesser projects and into this one. This Aear's Mother. My thoughts over the course of the night follows a steady, transitional process. They begin with panic. Panic that I have somehow screwed up my job somewhere along the line, and my career could potentially be at risk. Then after a while, I began to realize that this was bigger than myself, going back way further than I could have ever anticipated. And I started to consider this Aear's Mother as a ridiculous spending black hole, somehow lost in the chaotic, yet commonplace bureaucracy to be found in a governmental department such as this. As I began to fully appreciate the true size and scope of this anomaly, however, as it seemed to grow and swell in my hands as my stack of papers and files grew larger and larger, so too did my fear. A fear of what exactly it is that might be happening up in the North Sea. A fear of what would warrant such secrecy, such misdirection, such vast quantities of diverted material, and whether I'm even supposed to have discovered it at all. When the clock strikes 3 a.m. that night, I reluctantly accept that it is time to call it quits. I gather all of my papers and stuff most of them into my cabinet, locking it up tightly, and I take a few choice papers home with me. Completely against the rules, of course, and a massive breach of security. But I don't know why I did it. I just felt compelled to. And when I sleep, my dreams are restless and uneasy. They are comprised of dark, frothing waves, grey and angry, and tipped in white, crashing against anonymous, nondescript structures of stone beneath a resentful sky. I awake at 6:45 in a cold sweat, as the first cool rays of the dawn begin to filter in through the window. Rubbing my eyes in the shadows of my room, I decide to call in sick. I can't go into work today. I need more time. More time to learn about this bizarre, secretive project. And I need to decide for myself if it's something I need to report on and bring to the higher-ups, or to bury and keep quiet about forever. Perhaps I'm being a little obsessive. In the cold light of the day, after hastily washing and heading to my car, I pause for a moment, the keys held in an outstretched hand. Maybe I should go into work. Maybe I should forget about all this. But as I consider the paths ahead, I feel almost as if something is calling to me. I don't know how else to describe it. This curious sensation. And I allow it to wash through me as I stand there beside my car. I googled the name of the project last night, by the way, as soon as I learned about it, just to see what would come up. Not a great deal, of course, as to be expected, but what I found instead were a series of articles about the project's namesake, Aear. The articles varied in their exact descriptions, depictions, and analysis of the so-called Aear. But what they all agreed upon was that he was some legendary, long-forgotten giant of the sea. A beast, but man-like, at one with both the winds and the water, and as tumultuous as the two combined. A living storm in the North Sea. More memories of my dream flashed through my head. It had been so vivid. It had all felt so real. I can almost taste the salt and the spray on my tongue, feel the energy from the crackling, forked lightning against my skin. I set my jaw, and with my mind made up, I haul open the car door. I hastily tapped the zip code to my destination into my phone, and I set off, my foot pressed down on the accelerator. My dreams were trying to tell me something important about this project, and I need more answers. So, I speed away south to the capital and to the Library of Congress, the largest of its kind in the world. Am I doing the right thing here? I think to myself along the drive. My mind teeters between two states. On the one hand, I'm being ridiculous. That to call in sick over a data anomaly is ludicrous and childish. But then, on the other hand, I've never seen anything like this. I work with incredibly sensitive information, and it's possible I've stumbled across something truly dangerous. I've already broken major rules by abusing my security clearance and taking documents home with me. What was I thinking? But it's too late now. I have committed. Gotta keep going. Keep on moving forward. I clench my hands around the wheel as I approach the border to the city. Officer? A clerk behind the desk says to me, adjusting her glasses. Yes, what can I do for you this morning? I'm not an officer, but I don't correct her. Instead, I decide to lie. My outward expression and tone of voice is cool and calm, but my heart hammers. I'm here on official business, ma'am. I say to her. There's been a privacy breach, and a chance that some military documents relating to national security have been prematurely declassified. I believe the original copies of documents relating to this nature are kept in the basement? Yes, she replies. Yes, that's right. Please follow me. She turns to lead the way, and I swallow, gathering my thoughts. Easier than I'd expected, I think to myself, as she leads us below ground. I refer to the storage as a basement, but the truth is that beneath the library are a sprawling network of archives and halls and cabinets beyond count, a labyrinth of knowledge hidden away from the grubby hands of the library's regular patrons upstairs. The lighting becomes deeper and bluer as we descend, the sounds of our shoes echoing on the steps. As to be expected, it's not at all busy down here. Aside from another librarian at the far end of a corridor, we don't see another living soul on our journey. Right, well, my guide says to me, awkwardly coming to a stop at the edge of a vast archive with rolling shelves and movable panels as far as the eye can see. I'll, leave you to it, I suppose, unless you like some help. No, thank you, I reply, putting out a hand. I'll take it from here. I'll check in with you on my way out. I shan't be too long. Right, the librarian replies, pausing. And of course, I'm sure I won't need to explain to you, but many of the papers down here are extremely precious. So, she gestures to a plastic box fastened to a nearby wall. It looks as if it dispenses gloves, specifically designed for the handling of old papers. Yes, of course, I say to her, heading over and taking a pair from inside, pulling them onto my hands. And no flash photography, naturally, she says. After a final pause, she ends the conversation and begins to make her way back through the corridors. I watch her go, then take a slow deep breath. So far so good. And now, it was time to see what I could find. I pore over the texts, carefully hunting for any evidence I can find that materials have, over the past few decades, been diverted secretly away from their primary projects, and instead sent north towards the Arctic. Individually, the documents I find are almost useless, meaningless, but compiled, linked, they tell a story. Perhaps it's just confirmation bias, and I'm finding only what I want to find, but I gather the information all the same, and I record the evidence on my phone. I stumble across an old and heavily damaged book, one that at first I am convinced is not even in the right place. I carefully take it up in my gloved hands and leaf through the ancient yellow pages. The script is none that I recognize. The symbols used for the letters are not familiar to me. I use my phone to scan the pages, attempting to make use of a translation app, one that's been reliable in the past. But nothing returned. The app is unable to make anything of the script. With a furrowing of my brow, I turn the pages back to the beginning. and written in large letters in English across the very first page is the following phrase: "A living soul to be sent under keeps the mother locked in slumber." I pause, reading it through again. A dumb little rhyme, barely even a rhyme really, but it resonates with me. Someone somewhere, perhaps a long time ago, took the time to write this phrase as plainly as possible in the very first page of an ancient book. I swallow, my throat dry, and I return the book to its shelf. Continuing my research, I realize after a while that my time is limited. The librarian will begin to grow suspicious eventually, and the sooner I am out of here, the less time she'll spend dwelling on me, and the likelier it'll be that she'll forget I was even here. Hastily, I complete my research, returning the documents to their proper places. But one file I keep. Just one. The document in question is a single page dated 2002, with the stain of a coffee mug in the center. It relates to the movement of iron along a military track in Norway and includes a rejected request for a substantial increase in security manpower. Scribbled in the margins in spidery black ink are a few handwritten words, scrawled so poorly that the words themselves are almost illegible. But I worked them out. The letters are easier to see when you can make an educated guess. Aear? Is written. And beneath, risk from Thorvik. At least, I think that's what it says. Thorvik could be incorrect, but I can always try and work that out later. It's a name, I believe, a Norwegian family name. With the stolen document tucked carefully away on my person, I return to the surface and hand over the security lanyard I was given. The librarian thanks me and asks if I found what I was looking for. False alarm, it would seem. I reply with a nod. But thank you for your accommodation. No further action is required on your part. Enjoy the rest of your day. She mumbles a thank you and bids me the same in return, and I take my leave before she decides to ask any more questions. Aear. Thorvik. Aear. Thorvik. The words rumble around my head, and upon returning home, I gather all the intel I can, working on my proof and writing up all my evidence so far. To progress my investigation, I'll need to make use of the equipment we have at the office. But that'll have to wait till tomorrow. As with the previous night, my dreams are choppy and chaotic. I find myself clutching the rim of a small wooden boat as it is thrown around in the sea at the mouth of a monstrous cave, half hidden beneath the swirling, furious waters. The boat is being rocked and hauled by the waves ever closer to the entrance. Thunder crackles in the faraway sky, and there is nothing I can do but grit my teeth and tremble in fear as I approach the darkness of the cliffside cave, swept beneath its teeth of rock and towards a low, deep rumbling in the darkness ahead. A shadow stirs in this darkness. A chorus echoes between the walls. Water crashes up against the side of the boat, and I am jerked awake, panting and drenched in an icy sweat. I have to keep going, I tell myself in the darkness. I have to keep going. There's something out there that needs finding. I know it. I have a purpose I'm being led towards. So keep going forwards. Saturday comes around, and today, despite not being scheduled to work, I'm heading into the office. The building is quiet and manned by only a skeleton crew. They are surprised to see me, but I keep my head down and crack on with my business. Delving deep into the archives and armed with the fruits of my efforts, I begin at last to piece together a picture of the truth. Old Navy documents provide the greatest clues. Hints of construction projects, all in roughly the same area off the western coast of Norway. Evidence from the 1940s, a concerted effort from both American and Norwegian military officials to ensure that Norway would be a founding member of NATO. Regular but quiet, unnamed patrols and ever-shifting battle groups, all responsible for the same area of sea, despite a seeming lack of strategic significance. Bizarrely, these patrols, under a constantly changing series of justifications, have proof of going back to the 1800s. I find copies of old British naval reports, orders to maintain a presence, despite the inarguable use such ships would have had in the wars against France taking place at the time. There's something up there. There has to be. Something in the North Sea. Something big. Something worth all this effort. Aear's mother. With sweat budding across my forehead, I glance both ways down the hall, the lights blue and softly buzzing. I march forwards with false confidence and swipe my security clearance card against the sensor, and am granted access to an incredible piece of technology. A computer far beyond anything available for public purchase, and one that requires explicit permission to be used. I do not have this permission. What I am doing now is a disciplinary offense. But I load up the database and begin to type, hunting through active and classified military records for Aear and for Thorvik. Aear appears as highlighted in a handwritten letter from an American general to a Russian one, dated, to my surprise, during the height of the Cold War. An acknowledgement of an agreement honoring the protection of the Aear region and the maintaining of the manpower commitment for both sides. Manpower? Another reference to manpower? Manpower for what? Soldiers are being sent to this location on the Norwegian coast, and for what exactly? More worryingly, I discover a letter from the US president at the time to his Russian counterpart. A heartfelt and genuine request that Norway remain off the list of targets in the undesirable eventuality that the conflict between the East and West descends into an all-out nuclear war. A sharp, cold chill shivers menacingly through my body as I read the letter's penultimate line. It is imperative, sir, that Aear's mother remains asleep. Above all else, she is, and should justly remain, our highest priority. Our highest priority. I swallow and slump back in my chair with a creak as I process this. I am under no doubts now that I am not supposed to have stumbled upon this hidden project. But I'm in too deep now. Far too deep. I have to keep going. So Aear is replaced in the search engine with Thorvik, and I am met with a series of incidents from the early 2000s involving a man by the name of John Thorvik, a prominent member of a now disbanded Norwegian crime syndicate. A group called RISE eventually disbanded in an extensive operation led by US General Christopher Dorset. Curiously, all the incidents that Thorvik was involved in over the years seems to follow a pattern. They were strikes against harbors, shipyards, docks, and the Norwegian Coast Guard. There are a handful of articles about the group's connection to, seemingly, an ancient Norse cult of some kind. But there is little information about this supposed cult itself, and next to no actual proof or hard evidence. Thorvik was arrested in 2007, remaining in prison until 2023, when it appears he was released on good behavior. One of the last pictures of him before his arrest, one of the only pictures of him really, show a man being physically restrained by the police on a stretch of cliff by the coast. Thorvik's arm is exposed, the fabric of his shirt torn back, and the skin covered in a series of intricate tattoos, runes, glyphs, and symbols, all connected in the most mesmerizing patterns. And despite his struggling, Thorvik is not looking at the camera, nor at the two policemen attempting to restrain him. His head is turned and looks over one shoulder, his hair blown in the wind. The part of his expression that is visible is desperate and pained, and he stares resolutely out over the cliffside, out towards the frothing waves and the sea behind. What are you looking at, Thorvik? I want to scream. What's out there? You know, don't you? Someone became aware of your connection to this project and labeled you as a threat. So, where are you now? Searches for Thorvik's name bring up nothing but reports of his relatively uneventful release last year. Nor does the search for his former organization, the RISE, bring up anything of note. I pause, considering. After a quick stop at Google Translate, I decide to try searching instead for the Norwegian word for rice. The word is stige. And this time, I am returned some results. Naval reports and briefs, poorly translated to English from Norwegian, themselves translated from Russian. The briefs tell a story of harassment against Russian vessels in the Arctic Circle. They tell a story of a gathering growing movement amongst the group who go by stige with increasing frequency over the past month. Why has this not been made common knowledge? Perhaps because it is the Russians who are being targeted. I should think that the priority for intervention or closer, deeper analysis on this group has been left by the wayside. America has its hands full at the minute, that's no secret of course, and all this stuff is so recent. Has anyone anywhere pieced together the obvious link between stige and rice? Between this sudden increase in activity and Thorvik's release from prison? All this material being sent over to the Norwegian coast. What are they building? What are they maintaining? What are we building? It is imperative, sir, that Aear's mother remains asleep. Above all else, she is, and should justly remain, our highest priority. I begin to panic. It is becoming unavoidably clear that something massive is going on across the ocean, hidden away in the ice of the North Sea's frozen water. I rub my hands across my eyes, and after a brief pause, my hands trembling, I press the required keys to compile my findings. I make digital copies, and even print out an entire folder's worth of papers. I know full well that in doing so, I will be sending alerts to the higher-ups. My behavior will be flagged. But I no longer cared. I need answers. And more importantly, if I'm the only one to discover these recent links, then my findings could be of critical security importance. Thorvik's group is called Rise, for fuck's sake. Rise. It is imperative, sir, that Aear's mother remains asleep. Above all else, she is, and should justly remain, our highest priority. What is it that these people want to rise, exactly? What is their interest in the Norwegian west coast? I'm a few pieces short of the total picture, so the mystery of Aear's mother remains to me just that. A mystery. But I slammed down my folder of proof on the desk of my boss at the first possible opportunity, ahead of being called in myself. "Gus," he says, leaning around the monstrous folder and raising an eyebrow at me. Enlighten me. What the fuck is this? "Sir?" I begin, taking a deep breath. I am aware that what I have done will likely cost me my job, but I am of the belief that a crucial military operation in the North Sea is under threat, and I am willing to risk my career to try and protect it, even if I do not fully understand its purpose. My superior looks to the officials on either side of him. All three of them stared at me, bewildered. "And what is this operation?" he asks, and I begin to flip through my folder. "Aear's mother," I tell him, and he repeats it back to me. I nod. I am not aware of any ongoing operation by the name of Aear's mother, Gus. Now it's my turn to stare at him. "What? No, sir, that's impossible. You must have done. All my work suggests it is of an unbelievable importance, with secrecy levels rivaling." "Gus?" My boss puts out a hand. "Stop for a second. I am telling you now that I am aware of no such operation, and I'm gonna be totally honest." He gestures to the piles of papers across his desk. This is the work of a madman." I begin to splutter out a protest, but he interrupts me. "Now, I know of course that you have made unsanctioned use of the MMT, and you will face disciplinary action for this. However, it seems so far that no private files of individuals were accessed, and no unauthorized folders of sensitive personal data were accessed. So I imagine the disciplinary action we eventually decide upon will be minimal. Now Gus, please." He tries to wave me out of his office. "You're an excellent employee. Please get out of my office, and I don't want to see this nonsense in here again." I am dumbstruck for what seems like an uncomfortable amount of time. Then awkwardly, I stand up and begin to gather my papers. I lean close to the man opposite. "Sir," I say, "I understand if you're required to act ignorant about this, if you have some secret clearance regarding Aear's mother. But please, I implore you, put time into researching Stiga, this Norwegian group in the North Sea, and Thorvik." "Gus," my boss repeats, his brow furrowed. "With respect, you're wasting my time. Please return to your desk." And so I leave, more confused upon my exit than I was at my entrance. At least on the way into my boss's office, I had some kind of clear purpose and message to get across. Now I don't know what the hell to do. I was not afraid of losing my job when I thought that such an act would actually have meaning. It felt almost noble, I guess, even if I don't truly understand what I would be protecting. But to be dismissed so unceremoniously, to lose my access to the files and reports and the higher-ups all for nothing, that would be a tragedy. A pointless one. So as the days go by, I continue to try and get my message heard. I try to reach out to the higher-ups, my boss's bosses, and the like. But the problem is that the officials above me are the ones most likely to fire me outright. The people above them won't listen, and the people above them won't give me the time of day. I'm lost in the bureaucracy of the machine, and it's almost as if I can feel my sanity slipping away. The dreams each night become more intense. Each time, I find myself caught in the waves. I am carried further and further and deeper into that horrible cave. The sounds of the rumbling grow louder, more intense, more frightful. The hum of a chorus of low, melodic chanting rises up to meet it. Sickly lights are thrown up against the walls of the caves. The stalactites and rocky outcrops cast shifting, sinister shadows across every surface, and the water shakes and rocks beneath me. In my waking hours, I find at last my best possible chance to draw attention to my plight. And this chance is provided in the form of a military parade through the city center. A parade that I know for a fact will be attended by none other than General Christopher Dorset, the very man in charge of the operation that led to the first arrest of John Thorvik. There's no way he would miss this. Not this particular parade. Surely, how could he? So I stand in the rain with my coat drawn tightly above my shoulders, huddled against one of the barriers as the band plays. The troops proudly march past me along the road with their flags flying behind them in the rising wind. My eyes scan the crowd. My knuckles tighten on the metal barrier that comes up to my waist. I know what the general looks like. I've seen his pictures. He'll be at the front of one of the processions. The minutes tick by, and the men march past. The rain falls and streaks down my face. And just as I'm beginning to fret that I've missed the man, I see him, marching in step in his uniform between two long blocks of soldiers. I take a deep breath, and I call to him. "General Dorset?" I shout, as the people around me gasp and turn to face me. "General Dorset!" I do not leap the barrier. To do so could be seen as an active threat, and I would be at risk of being shot. I keep my hands plainly visible and continue to call for him, desperation overriding my social consciousness. "General Dorset!" The general half turns to me, alarmed, furrowing his brow as he watches this strange man call out to him from the crowd. I can see in the corner of his eyes a trio of men making their way to me. Two of them are uniformed. The third is in plain clothes. "General Dorset!" I shout. "I know about Thorvik!" The men reach my position as the general marches right past, and they begin the process of forcibly carting me away, back through the crowds and away from the position of the general. I manage one final shout before the wind is knocked out of me. "Aear's mother is in danger!" I bellow. And with this, the general's head snaps around to stare at me, his step faltering only very briefly, before he immediately corrects himself. He gets a good look at my face before I am drawn through the crowd, and I struggle against the officers around my arms. All right, let me go. I'm not a threat," I grunt at him, But it's not until I am patted down and after I've shown my ID that they begrudgingly release me, shaking their heads at my lack of professionalism. Doesn't matter what they think. The general saw me. He heard my message. And if there's any merit to anything I'm doing at all here, then he'll find me. If he leaves me be, then I'll give up. I'll give it all up. It means I'm clearly suffering from the effects of some strange, sleep-deprived lunacy, and I'll simply stash my folder of proof away and return to my duties in my regular, boring job. Naturally, however, that course of action does not come to pass. In plain clothes, the general finds me, sitting by the window in a bar on the very same street, and he sits opposite me, the rainwater dripping off of his jacket as he takes me in. "Alright," he says to me. "What's the story here? Who are you?" I tell him the truth, that I'm a pen pusher who's in way over his head, and that I've stumbled across something that everyone around me is either ignorant of, or has simply forgotten. "Aear's mother," he says, scratching his chin. "If she's in danger, then where's your proof?" I reach down and pull my laptop from my bag, and I show him, piece by piece, the digital records of the evidence I have compiled, the release of Thorvik, the increase in harassment of Russian ships, the Stiga gang on the move. "They're not just a gang," Dorset grunts. "They're worse than that. Cult-like, really. Thorvik was one of the worst of them. And if he's leading them now, then, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all if they've become more aggressive. It also doesn't surprise me that the government aren't doing a damn thing about him. If he's causing low-level trouble for the Russians right now, then, well, if they're even aware of him at all, I imagine the policy will be to leave him well alone." "But what about Aear's mother?" I ask. "What about the supplies being sent over to Norway?" "They might be automated," he replies in a low voice, as the patrons of the bar bustle around us. "Or hell, it's all so compartmentalized that the folks in charge of equipment and shipping might not have any contact with the guys in charge of the Mother's Defense." "The Mother's Defense?" I repeat. Then I lean in close, and I whisper, fearful of the answer. "Sir, what exactly is Aear's mother?" The rain beats against the glass beside us. Shadows of the water washing down the window spill into the room and over our table, marked with the stains of beer, and the floor stamped with wet footsteps. "Aear's mother, pal, is an abomination," the general mutters, holding my gaze. "A terror beneath the sea, and the spawner of a great manner of evil. And it is crucial, you must understand, crucial beyond everything, that her sleep remains unbroken." His knuckles turn white as he clenches his fists against the table. He leans in closer. "Above all else, there is one true priority, and this priority is to keep her asleep. Understand me?" I nod, my blood cold. "I'll speak to the people I need to," the general concludes, leaning back in his chair. "I'll have a task force sent out within 3 days. If Thorvik is on the move, then we really have very little time to waste." "Send me to," I blurt out, and the general squints at me. "You what?" "Send me to," I repeat. "Please, I can't explain it, but I need to go. I've been having these dreams. I think it's important I go. And hey, I might be of use. I know things. My research." "Look," Dorset interrupts. "If you insist, I'll assume you have a good reason for doing so, but you'll have to be ready. Give me your details. The call for you could come at any moment, and if you don't answer, you'll be left behind. But I appreciate deeply the efforts you have made and the risks you've taken. So in return for the trouble you faced to bring this to my attention, I'll take you along on the mission, if you're prepared. And you can promise you'll be of use?" "I am," I replied, sitting upright. And yes, I can be of use. When the call comes, I'll be ready. Very well then, the general says, his chair scraping along the floor as he stands back up. Then I think we're done here. Till next time. I watch as the man takes his leave, and the next few days are spent in a daze. I check my phone every 5 to 10 minutes, or at least it certainly feels that way. My dreams become choppier, colder, darker, and they are interrupted by imaginary alerts from the phone. Each time I groggily roll over to check, heart pounding, and I see that there is nothing there. It was all in my dream. No one is calling. I worry that perhaps no one will call. But on the 4th day, I am met with a knock on the door. I answer and find myself face to face with a pair of men, both with sunglasses and stern expressions. One of the men inclines his head. "The time is now," he says simply. "Are you ready to go?" Adrenaline surges. "I am," I reply, reaching immediately down for the grab bag I've prepared, left deliberately by the shoe rack. "I'm ready to go." He nods, and the journey begins. I am taken by car along the highway as the sun sets, the trees and hills in the distance whizzing past the window, all bathed in the orange of the horizon. I step out onto an airfield, a control tower in the distance blinking with colored lights as I am shuttled into an aircraft. My ears hum and throb, and I grit my teeth as we ascend, leaving the fields and plains and clouds far below us as we cross the sea, the soldiers and I. The general is not with us in this plane, but I can only assume he is in another. I am briefed on the mission, though a few key details are left out. The battle group's job is to stop Thorvik and Stiga and to protect the objective, codenamed of course, Aear's mother. I am to stay well out of the way and remain part of the group bringing up the rear with the supplies. The plane is fast, faster than any aircraft I've ever been in before. And as the night deepens, we eventually start to circle an island, alone in the North Sea. Upon landing, the doors are hauled open and cold Arctic air blasts inside. I squint and grimace and shield my eyes as I with the others depart the plane and head for a nearby helicopter, the blades already whirring and spinning impatiently. The helicopter carries us to a port on the Norwegian coast, and from there we are bundled into boats and we set off across the sea. I hold tight to the rails as the boat bounces and tears through the waves, tilting my head to look up at the sky as the salt and the flickers of spray strike me across the face. The sky is dark and angry. Its clouds are being steadily, relentlessly churned above my head, and thunder crackles in the far-off distance. My stomach lurches, and I realize that this is just like my dream, exactly like it in fact, down to the sounds and smells. And I know too that soon I will see the cave, the mouth of that terrible, gaping cave in the side of the cliff, endlessly swallowing the water that crashes between its jagged teeth. I look behind me and out to sea. There is nothing but fog and storm. There is no way back. I got what I wanted, and now I have to pay the price. Just keep going forwards. "You alright, man?" a soldier asks me. He clamps a hand down onto my shoulder. "Yes," I reply. "Yeah, I'm okay." I suppress a wave of nausea and look across to the boat opposite. It's a fair distance away, and I cannot make out the features of the people on the deck. But I see the general. His uniform is different to the others. He looks out over the sea, and lightning flashes through the mists in the sky above. The feeling that now threatens to overcome me is the sensation of awaiting the monster in a nightmare. It's there. I can feel it, just around this corner. It's hiding under the bed, and if I look, I will see it, and that will be the end. But the boat goes only in a single direction, onwards across the waves. A long dark shadow emerges from the fog, and reveals itself as the outstretched arm of a cliff jutting through the tumultuous water. A wind ripples between the soldiers, and a flak thrashes around its pole as the jaws of the cave shimmer into sight. I cower in horror, taking a retreating step back, even as the boat carries us closer. "Remember," an officer grunts through a lull in the wind. He isn't speaking to me, but to his men. "Remember, this is to be treated as a standard counter-insurgency operation. The likelihood is that Stiga will present themselves as hostiles, and you are to react accordingly. Thorvik is to be captured alive, if possible. But the highest priority is the safety of the objective." He hesitates. "Aear's mother is to be kept asleep, no matter the cost. Is this understood?" "Sir, yes, sir," comes the unanimous reply, and the boat rocks as the tide draws us closer and closer to the gaping dark mouth in the cliffside. I touch my forehead and mutter a quick prayer as water splashes up the side of the boat, and the murky overhead grey is lost to the enveloping blackness of the cave. Silence falls amongst the ranks, and our trio of boats are navigated with white-knuckle precision between the rocks. Deeper we go, and the sounds from my dreams begin to prickle at my eardrums. Louder they grow, drums in the darkness, a chanting in a language I do not recognize. It sounds vaguely Scandinavian, perhaps, but older, more ancient. Why did you come here, Gus? I ask myself, and the question is not one I can properly answer. Because I had to, is the only reply I can give. Because I know that I am needed, somehow. I know that I am needed here. We are carried along an icy underground river, and before long, we come across a set of enormous steel gates stuck deep into columns of concrete and embedded into the rock. Rails and girders protrude out at all angles, and I watch as the general jumps from the side of his boat and down onto a nearby dock as it scrapes against the ship's side. The general marches to a control room, and the sounds of his shouts are sent echoing around the cavern as the ocean laps at the sides of our vessels, and the panicked staff of the control room put out their hands and frantically plead their defense. I cannot make out what is being said, but the tones of urgency and fear are quite clear amongst the gloom. The general returns to his boat, and the lights in the cavern change color. Slowly, gradually, the great gates are hauled open, and the water churns and cascades in on itself as the boats are rocked and water spills through the gap. The sounds of drums and the ancient chanting increases significantly in volume. And a deep, primal fear is sent like a dagger into my heart. The path is cleared, and deeper we go, into the darkness, sailing steadily along the river. Curious, twisted lights are thrown against the walls of the cave, revealing symbols there, carved during a time gone by into the rock. I am unable to help myself from staring in awe at these ancient runes, these forgotten shapes and lines. I have no idea what they say, of course, but by simply looking at them, it's almost as if I can hear the long-dead authors whispering into my head. My attention is diverted. I am momentarily distracted, as are many of the soldiers. And perhaps this is exactly what Stiga had hoped for. From perches and gaps in the jagged rock wall, there suddenly appear a myriad of brief flashes. The sounds of bursts of weaponry surround us, echoed loudly in the cavern, and in seconds, the sides of the boat are littered with small smoking holes. The rope securing a box of equipment in front of us is suddenly torn right through, and it springs back. The now freed box sent tumbling down the deck as the boat rocks on the river. Something bright and fast glances off the soldier beside me's helmet, and he ducks down, immediately bellowing orders. Another soldier to my right is not so lucky, and a splash of bright scarlet shoots from the side of his head. He hits the deck like a sack of bricks and begins to leak from his ear across the floor. I shout out in alarm, ducking down with my back against the wall of the deck as the bullets begin raining down. The soldiers spring into action as orders come blaring from all directions. Everyone knows their role, Everyone knows their immediate superior, and like a well-oiled machine, they return fire. The boats are separated, and evasive maneuvers deployed. "Get the fuck inside!" Someone shouts at me, grabbing me by the back of my collar and hauling me through a hatch in the floor and beneath the deck. I listen, cowering, as the shouting continues and the screams and ripples of gunfire echo around in the cavern above me. I stumble and collapse into the wall as the boat slams hard into what I can only presume is the rocky ledge that borders the river, and I am then sent tumbling in the opposite direction as the boat shifts violently from side to side. My bag is flipped upside down, and many of my papers are sent sprawling across the floor. "No!" I gasp in alarm, hurriedly and clumsily attempting to grab them back up as I struggle to keep my balance. And when I finally have them all gathered, I suddenly realize that the sounds of the gunfire have ceased overhead. I press an ear to the hatch to listen, but there are no longer any sounds of a fight. Slowly, cautiously, I raise the hatch and creep back up onto the deck. The bodies of 3 soldiers have rolled up against the nearby set of crates that remained rigged to the deck wall, and blood has been spilled and splattered across the deck. I peek over the side of the boat and see that it has been tethered to the nearby rock, and the ledge right beside me leads away into the gloom and towards the source of the mysterious lights and that ever-present, ominous chanting. I take a deep breath. I steel my nerves. Then, I leap over the rails and off the side of the boat onto the rock ledge. And after finding my feet, I take off through the cavern, being sure to keep to the shadows, my boots pattering against the wet stone. I creep between towers of rock and see slick stalagmites. I pass by the body of a man in grey robes, a rifle still clutched tightly in his hand. A hand that I cannot help but notice is marked with tattoos and carved with symbols similar in appearance to those on the walls of the cavern. I pass by the corpse of a dead soldier, blood leaking down towards the river below, and as the sounds of the drums become almost unbearable, it merges at once with an explosion of gunfire and a rise in the chorus of chanting. I peer around the corner and am immediately rushed with a feeling of insignificance, of total, frightening irrelevance in the face of something far greater than myself, something far beyond my comprehension. The cavern here widens out to monstrous proportions. Steam and mists swirl in the shadows of the far corners, such that I cannot see many of the far walls. Stalactites hang down from a jagged, rocky ceiling way above my head, and all around are ledges and outcrops and natural formations beyond count. The natural wonders are joined by ones that have been clearly man-made, though I could not say for certain how old they are. Ancient pillars and statues of monstrous beings, broken and cracked with missing pieces. And chains. Enormous gargantuan rusted chains all interlinked through the rock itself, each link the size of a car or bigger, tensing under some unseen pressure. The raging river disappears underground, but its roar, if slightly muffled, remains just as menacing. A great white circle has been carved into the stone of the ground below me, and in that hole is only darkness. Darkness and smoke. Soldiers jump and move like toys from my vantage point. In a temple's worth of roped figures, both men and women return fire from their various positions. It can only be Stiga, surely. They fly a host of flags and banners, some with slogans, some with pictures, and they are the source of the chanting. Up high on a ledge across from me, they form concentric rings, hands held as they sing their terrible melody into the cavern. One of the flags is blue, with Stiga written across it in white. Another is black, with Rise emblazoned upon it in gold. The battle rages. I am powerless to do a thing but watch from afar, as soldiers band together as they rush forwards, shouting, pointing, shooting. Tactically, they are far superior to the roped figure of the cult that have forced their way into this cave from some secretive hidden passage. The cult, however, has the advantage of size, as they outnumber the soldiers by 4 to 1 at least. Nor are they amateurs by any stretch. I would not be surprised to learn that they were being commanded by X-Forces members themselves. Across from me, a man steps forward onto the edge of an outcrop of stone, and he throws out his arms. His expression mad and gleeful as he looks down to the chaos below us. I stare at him. It is Thorvik himself, no doubt about it. He has aged, for sure, but no old man is he. His hair is long, and he bellows in a voice unlike any I've ever heard, down into the cavern, and to the soldiers, and to his followers below. "Aear's mother shall awaken here today," he shouts, his hair whipped about his shoulders in a wind I cannot feel. "The world shall be cleansed of the plague. Today, brothers and sisters, we return the earth to its primal state. The honor has been all mine." An idea flashes through my head. I don't know if I'll have the constitution to pull it off, but it's worth a try. So I take a deep breath and I scamper back around the corner, ever hugging the wall as I creep from place to place as hastily as I can, eventually reaching for the gun of the slayed man. I take it up into my hands, the metal cool, and return to my position at the height of the great cavern, with its view of the pillars below and the hectic gunfire and the runes carved across the wall. And, more importantly, from this position, I am given a clear line of sight to Thorvik, standing directly opposite. The distance is great, but we are almost perfectly level. I look down at the weapon in my trembling hands. I've never actually fired a gun at anyone before, but if I am to stop an awakening of whatever terror lurks in the darkness below, then this could be my only chance. I peer around the rock before me. I raise the weapon and lock Thorvik into my sights. I calm myself. I collect my thoughts. And I fire. The sound far louder than I was expecting. My ear rings in pain and I drop the weapon. But my attempt was for nothing. The shot goes wide and Thorvik is missed. He flinches in alarm and lowers his hands, turning to the smoking location of the bullet in the rock beside him. Then he looks around wildly, attempting to discern its source. I hide behind an outcrop of stone, my chest rising and falling, and I listen as Thorvik shouts some commands to his inner circle in Norwegian. I look again, and I watch as they adjust their positions. Thorvik vanishes into the grey-white blur of the crowd, and my chance is lost. Cursing, I slam my fist against the rock and then grab up the weapon, clambering unsteadily down towards the ground below me as the fight rages on. Down towards the stone and concrete floor and that enormous round hole in the middle. Adrenaline surges, and I do not truly appreciate how vastly out of my depth I am until a bullet flies past my ear and the hairs across my forearms all stand on end in unison. "Get down!" A familiar voice shouts from right beside me, and I turn to see the general. His eyes shining as gunfire and hollers of alarm and order go echoing around the walls. Shadows leap and waver in time to the flashes of the weaponry. I grab the man's shoulders. "They're trying to wake her up, aren't they? The cult, they're trying to awaken Aear's mother. We cannot let that happen, you hear me?" The general shouts back at me above the clamor. "Under any circumstance, stay here and shoot anyone in a rope that comes close." We turn at the sound of a great metal grinding and look out over the battlefield. Previously hidden by the outcrops of stone, but now quite clear, an enormous, roughly spherical structure of interlinked bands of thick ancient metal begins to whir and creak. It stands directly across from us on the other side of the monstrous circular pit, and the cult members delight in its turning and the showers of rust that have begun to rain from its slow, meandering spirals. The great chains, too, have begun to groan and creak. Rust falls from the links like a fine red powder. I do not see him, but I hear the voice of Thorvik echo around the cavern. His words are Norwegian, and they are met with cheers and a renewed war cry from the fanatical members of Stiga. "It's time to end this," the general says, and I see in his face the briefest of glimpses of a long, tired history. I see the expression of a man who has seen far more than he ever signed up for. And as quickly as it appeared, that bitter weariness is replaced by a furious determination. And with a clamp on my shoulder, he vanishes from sight into the fray, guns rattling and bullets striking the stone at all angles. I do as I am ordered, and the fight goes on. Radios crackle with desperate requests for reinforcements, but I know they won't get here in time. The primary passage is too dangerous to be rushed through, and we still don't know how Stiga was able to infiltrate from the other side. My thoughts are broken by the appearance of a man with grey-flecked hair in a long flowing rope. He rushes right past my position and stoops to collect the weapon of a fallen soldier. He half turns to me and freezes in place, our eyes locked. For a second, my heart stops. I stare at him, and he stares at me. Then, in a sudden movement, he twists his body around to face me. Bang. My hands shake, and my weapon steams from the barrel as the cult member goes down, a darkening pool of blood spilling out from his chest. "You killed the man, Gus," I hear in my head as I stare at his corpse. "You shot him in cold blood." A nervous laugh escapes my lips, and I clench the gun a little tighter. The rest of the fight is a blur. Bodies fall constantly on both sides of the battle. And by some miracle, I survive right to the end, as men and women are brutally taken down all around me. I do not know how much time has passed, but the cavern is littered with bodies and streaked with blood. The enormous metal contraption has increased the pace of its spinning. It now sends its rings within rings around and around at a regular pace, like a heartbeat. Each rotation sends out a blast of air along the cavern, rustling the blood-stained robes of the fallen cult members. I am one of 3 now. There is only the general and Thorvik and myself. Thorvik stands before the ancient metal on the opposite side of the huge hole in the ground. His hands are outstretched, and madness is clear across his face. He laughs as the general beside him levels his gun. "You are too late, Christopher," Thorvik boasts. And as with before, I get the sensation that I am seeing only the climax of a long and complex play, a play in which I barely know the actors and have missed the arc of the narrative. There is a long sad story to be told between these men, and I am here only to witness its very end. "You are too late. She will awaken. My lifetime's purpose is at last complete." Thorvik closes his eyes and smiles. And with an angry grimace, the general fires. Thorvik shudders as the bullet passes into his chest. He stumbles backwards, and he falls with a dull thud, twitching on the ground, his face still fixed with a twisted grin. A deep, ethereal rumbling echoes up from below us. The general and I are unable to keep from glancing down into the abyss, that heart of darkness in the center of the cavern. As the muffled sounds of the river rage beneath, something stirs in the mists and the smoke. Little pinpricks and flickers of light dance from the depths across the surface of my eyes, flashing in a color I can't quite discern, flashing with the light of a long-dead star. Shapes within shapes begin to writhe in the darkness. The very tips and edges of something colossal stir in the void, massive, beyond comprehension in its size. The circle in the rock, I realize, is not any kind of gateway to the world below. It is just a window, a tiny, infinitesimally small window when compared to the horror that slumbers beneath. The lights begin to converge, and the shimmering edges of a liquid-like body begin to form from the darkness. And I feel a hand grab the back of my collar, and I am suddenly hauled away from the edge. I hadn't even realized how close I crept. I blink and I find myself staring into the face of the general. "There isn't much time," he shouts to me as the river rumbles and roars. "You're the researcher. You know how to stop this thing, right?" I hesitate, and to my utter dismay, I realize that I do. I do know how to stop it. So, I nod. "Good." The general grins. "So you know we need to give it a body. We throw it a corpse to keep it quiet, and then we'll call in the whole goddamn armed forces if we need to. We'll shut down that thing." He points to the ancient contraption. "And we'll have this bastard put well and truly back to sleep. So move, help me." Half-dazed, I nod once more, and I hurry around the rim of the great circle to Thorvik's body. Together with the general, we drag him to the edge and haul him over, tossing his corpse down into the shadows below, where he quickly vanishes. "It's what he would have wanted, the freak," the general mutters, wiping his forehead. "To be with his beloved creature." He looks up to the contraption, and fear begins to take hold of him. "Why isn't it stopping?" he asks. Then louder, "Why isn't it stopping?" He looks in panic down to the shifting shapes in the shadows below. A long, low groan shivers up from the darkness. "It should be slowing at least. A body is needed to keep her down, right? Right?" My stomach lurches as all around me, time seems to slow down. Because the general is not, of course, entirely correct. The findings of my research converge in my head. All of it. The papers and hours and efforts, all pointing towards one singular finding. My purpose, I now realize. The thing that has been guiding me since the beginning. The power that drew me to this exact spot. To this terrible cave in the mists of the North Sea. I look down at my hands, and I can barely even see them. So this is why I'm here. This is why I felt so compelled to pursue this. This obsession. I slowly raise my head. The general has begun to drag the bodies of nearby cult members to the edge of the pit, and he kicks them in one by one, growing increasingly desperate with every attempt. His attempts are all useless, of course, because the passage that I see in my head is as clear as the brightest flash of lightning. I can see in my mind's eye the little poem that was written on the first page of that ancient book way down in the archives of the library. A living soul to be sent under keeps the mother locked in slumber. Is this really what I have to do? I ask myself as I begin to approach the general's location. Is there another way? Please, there must be another way. I scream silently to myself as I draw closer and closer. But deep in my heart of hearts, I know that there is not. And so, when I reach the general's location, I do not hesitate. He is tired, exhausted from the battle and from dragging over the bodies. Too exhausted to fight back when I grab him by the lapels of his uniform and haul him with all my strength down and into the great hole. The last I see of him is an expression of confusion, of horror, and of sickening betrayal. Then he vanishes into the darkness with a discordant flickering of the lights in the depths. The great metal contraption begins to slow. Steadily, its rotations decelerate until they at last draw to an aching, weary halt. Mist and steam pours from the pit. And then, there is nothing. Nothing stirs. The river rages, but the air is still. I sit there for a while on the cold, hard stone, and then I begin to make my slow and shambling way back up the side of the wall, along the various perches. I return to my original position at the height of the cavern, and without even a second look, I begin to retrace my steps, hugging the wall of the cave as I follow the length of the river to the boat, still in its original position and jammed against the stone. Here, I can go no further. So, I simply wait at the edge of the deck, my mind cold and empty. I'll remain there for another hour, until a series of ships appear from the gloom, full to the brim with allied soldiers and flying with a myriad of flags. The first ship docks just in front of mine, and within minutes, I am surrounded by flashlights and weapons and the sounds of barked orders. I raise my hands and comply as the remaining ships steer past and sail deeper into the cavern. What happened to the advance team? I am asked over and over. Where is the general? And every time, I gave the same response. They died, I say to them. And they succeeded. Aear's mother sleeps. Do whatever you need to do to keep it that way. For the last time, the officer shouts with frustration. And to this, I look up at him, staring him in the eyes. He hesitates mid-sentence. Perhaps he sees something in my face. He closes his mouth and clenches his jaw, and then nods to his men. Get this one back to the carrier. I think he's seen enough. 1 month later, I am back at my desk. No one ever learned the truth about what happened to the general, though I am sure that there are those with greater knowledge than myself that suspect the truth. My obsession, despite its all-encompassing impact on my life, had in the end very little ramifications for my actual job. My assigned disciplinary punishments were minimal and mostly forgotten about anyway. I tap away at the keyboard. I'm cross-checking a series of reports made regarding the use and costs of alloy steel in a military base in Iceland, ensuring that there is sufficient collaboration between these reports to prevent any red flags being raised. My colleague groans and stretches in his chair, arising and pulling his jacket over his shoulders. He nods to me as he takes his leave for the evening, and I give him a wary wave of the hand in response. The office is pretty much empty right now. I can hear a keyboard being tapped on some distance away. The overhead fan rotates steadily. The lights blink in the dark distance beyond the windows. And something catches my eye in the document I'm reading. A hyperlinked little number. And upon clicking, I am sent to a recent report with some terrible formatting, detailing, it would appear, the relocation of a small amount of material, all sent east, across the North Sea. I hesitate. An Arctic chill ripples across my skin, and I decide to close the document down. I drag the cursor into the corner of the screen and click the X, and I begin the computer's shutdown procedure. I grab my jacket and pull it on over my shoulders, and I follow on behind my colleague, being sure to switch off the lights on the way out.